All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. It didn't take quarterback Derek Carr that long to find a new football home, as after being released by the Las Vegas Raiders last month, he agreed on a 4-year deal with the New Orleans Saints to be their new signal caller. Now, Carr had been given permission by the Raiders to speak with the Saints when he was still under contract with Las Vegas in order to potentially orchestrate a trade. However, a deal could not be reached, and a big part of that was the fact that New Orleans wanted Carr to restructure his contract. But when Carr was released by the Raiders, it was game on as he now had the opportunity to talk with any team around the NFL. And of course, the $1 million question is going to be, why did Carr choose the Saints? In my opinion, I think there are several things. Number one, the dome factor. You're playing indoors in New Orleans. You're playing indoors in Vegas, and of course, prior to that, playing in Oakland for the Raiders. You didn't really have to deal with the elements as much, and that's going to be the same case, playing in the Superdome down in New Orleans. On top of that, the talent on offense. You have Alvin Kamara at running back, Michael Thomas and Chris Olave at wide receiver. So right off the bat, you got something to work with right there. The familiarity with Saints head coach Dennis Allen because, of course, once upon a time, Dennis Allen was the head coach of the Raiders, who Carr spent his entire career with up until this year. And then on top of that, you look at it, Derek Carr immediately becomes the best quarterback in the NFC South. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, following the retirement of Tom Brady, look like they're going to go with Kyle Trask, at least for now. For Carolina, I know that they have a new head coach in Frank Reich, but it looks like as of now that Sam Darnold is going to be their guy. And with the Atlanta Falcons, as of now, it looks like Desmond Ritter. So, with that said, right off the bat, this is by Derek Carr, putting his name on the dotted line, he immediately becomes the best quarterback in the NFC South. This is a very winnable division where it's not going to take a lot to win this division if you are Carr and the Saints. Remember, last year the Bucks won this division with a record of 8-9. Everybody else in the NFC South was 7-10. So it's one of those where the thought, hypothetically speaking, is that the Bucks will take maybe a step or two back. And if you're the Saints, is Derek Carr that guy to help you get over that small hump in regards to being a postseason team? That remains to be seen. But obviously, again, Carr right off the bat is now the best quarterback, at least on paper, in the NFC South. When it's all said and done, I am not surprised that Derek Carr did not end up with the New York Jets. And I know that he met with the Jets. I know that there were some Jets fans, some, not all, that were hopeful that Derek Carr could possibly sign with the Jets. He had great meetings, from what you hear, with Jets brass. And, there were some players that were hopeful that he could potentially end up with the Jets. At the end of the day, I'm not surprised by this because I look at it, Derek Carr in free agency was never fully committed to the New York Jets. And the New York Jets were never fully committed to Derek Carr. Uh, Derek Carr was a fallback option for the Jets because the Jets really want Aaron Rodgers. The Jets courting Derek Carr is kind of like, you know what? We're going to have a relationship just for the purpose of having a relationship, but we're not going to be committed to each other. And it's one of those where now with the Jets, they did not get Derek Carr, of course. So obviously they're going to be all in on Aaron Rodgers, who this is the guy that they really want in the first place. So with that said, it wasn't going to work out. because again, both parties were not going to be fully committed to this. And I think if you're the Jets now, you got to push all of your chips to the table and go out there and get Aaron Rodgers. It's Aaron Rodgers or bust next year at quarterback for the Jets. And again, if you're Derek Carr, you just went from a division where you had to deal with Patrick Mahomes twice a year, Justin Herbert twice a year, and even though that he didn't have a great season, Russell Wilson twice a year. For the sake of argument, you join the Jets. You got to deal with the Buffalo Bills twice a year, the Miami Dolphins twice a year, and even though that the New England Patriots are not world beaters like they once were, you still got to deal with Bill Belichick and that defense. Not on top of that, the cold weather, and of course we know that the winds at the Meadowlands. I know that MetLife Stadium is not as bad as it was at the old Giant Stadium, but it's still on the same complex. Those winds could be very surly come late November, December, and January. Carr is really not a cold weather quarterback, so I think part of that factored in as well. And like I said, you know what? You're playing in the confines of the Superdome. You think about it. Uh, One of your road games is going to be in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You're also going to have one road game in Tampa against the Bucks. So right there, 10 of your 17 games that you're playing each year if you're Derek Carr are in favorable conditions for a passer. Now, getting to the meat and potatoes of Derek Carr. Yes, he's not, if you're going to judge a quarterback by the wins and losses, he's not going to be a world beater. He's 63 and 79 during his time with the Oakland and then Las Vegas Raiders. Almost threw in an LA Raiders comment there as well. But nonetheless, you also look at it, 217 touchdown passes to 99 interceptions. He was a four-time Pro Bowler, including finishing third in the MVP voting in 2016 when his season was abruptly cut short with a broken leg. Now, of course, last year was a train wreck for Derek Carr, but I personally, not a Derek Carr fan, but I'm personally willing to give him a mulligan due to the fact that he was doing this with Josh McDaniels. And for me, a guy like Josh McDaniels, we saw what he did during his time as his brief time as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, where he destroyed that offense. And to Josh McDaniels, it's one of those, like a lot of the Bill Belichick disciples. They try to go into their new spot and do everything the way that Belichick does. It only works for Belichick, and for a lot of what Belichick did, it worked because he had Tom Brady for so many years. It was oil and water from the beginning as far as a relationship with Josh McDaniels and Derek Carr. So because of that, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for 2021. But if you look at his last 3 years under a John Gruden offense, even though that it took some time for John Gruden to get lukewarm to Derek Carr, he wasn't really completely warm to him, but nonetheless, you look at 2018, Derek Carr completed nearly 69% of his passes. In 2019, he completed more than 70% of his passes. And in 2020, he completed more than 67% of his passes. And then in 2021, when he helped the Raiders make the playoffs, he completed nearly 68.5% of his passes. So you got to factor all of that in. You're with a head coach that wants you. More importantly, you're with a team, an organization that wants you if you're Derek Carr. Also, obviously the wins and losses cannot all be pinned on Derek Carr with the Raiders. Some of it should, but not all of it. But with that said, you look at the Raiders' defensive stats during Carr's time there, and they were dead last, if not near dead last, in almost every defensive category in the National Football League. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. And maybe, just maybe, a change of scenery would do it for him. Now, with Carr going to the Saints, does that make the Saints a Super Bowl contender? Absolutely not. But it's one of those where I think their chances improve because, again, this is a very winnable division. And if you get to the postseason, regardless if your record is bad or not, you win your division, you get a home playoff game, and from there, anything can happen. On top of that, the road to the Super Bowl from the NFC, at least for right now, is a lot more favorable than it is from the AFC. And a lot of that has to do with the strength of the quarterback play on the AFC side. You got Patrick Mahomes, you got Josh Allen, you got Joe Burrow. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's about to take a step up. We don't know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson, and I can keep going right down the list. But nonetheless, on the NFC side, you got Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. We don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. You also have, if you want, the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm like, at the end of the day, do you really trust Dak Prescott to get the Cowboys there? I'm not sure. And what's going to be the quarterback situation for the San Francisco 49ers, as well as Matthew Stafford coming back to the Rams. So when it's all said and done, it is a more favorable conference quarterback wise who you have to go through if you're Derek Carr in order to try to do something. So at the end of the day, this is a scenario I think emotionally this was the best fit for Derek Carr because he wanted to go to the Saints and the Saints wanted him. And honestly, this is at the same time Derek Carr's way of flipping the bird to Mark Davis and the Raiders on the way out the door because Mark Davis gave Derek Carr the opportunity to try to find a trade partner. And in doing so, the Saints were really the only team that he talked to prior to getting released by the Raiders. We saw how the end of the season worked out for Derek Carr with the Raiders, where Josh McDaniels and Mark Davis has basically sat him down and told him to go home after he had been the face of the franchise for so many years. He exercised that clause in his contract. He knew that the Raiders had to guarantee his $40 million 3 days after the Super Bowl. They weren't willing to do that, so they had no choice but to release him. And he still gets the team that he wanted to play for when the Raiders were ready to go in a different direction. And also, the Raiders get absolutely nothing back in return because there was not a trade orchestrated. So he goes to a team with talent on offense. The Saints have talent on this defense, led by the likes of Cam Jordan up front. So I think this is a good situation for Carr. I think he'll have an opportunity to win the division in the NFC South. The rest will be up in the air. But at the end of the day, this is where Derek Carr wanted to be. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.